Hello and welcome to the mini harp lesson series. Let me know if you can hear me, let me know if you can see me, if you could send a comment or a like depending whether you're watching on Instagram or Facebook. For those of you who are here the first time, my name is Zuzanna and I'm a harpist and harp teacher. I live in Edinburgh, Scotland, and I teach harp among others through this weekly lesson series on Fridays on Instagram and Facebook. I can see some people are tuning in. If you could send me a like and just let me know if everything is okay with the sound, if you can hear me, and as always, if you hear that I'm speaking too fast, please tell me to slow down. I realize that I've got an accent and that it might be hard to understand if I start rushing, and today we've got quite a lot of things to talk about because the topic today is one of the biggest questions that a lot of people ask themselves, whether they are interested in taking harp lessons or not. How hard is it to play the harp? And I will be answering that question today. I will be also talking about some of the most common challenges that may appear when you're starting to learn to play the harp and how to manage that. So if you've just started to play and there is something that you're struggling with, you can put your questions in the comments here, and I'll be checking the comments every now and then and answering the questions that you may have. I'll be also answering the questions about my new harp course, which is on sale now, and if you would like to study with me or if you would like to know anything else about that, you can also ask questions here. Still waiting to hear if anyone has any problems with audio and video. I imagine that if no one is shouting that you can't hear me or something, then it's all fine, but if you could just say hello, where are you tuning in, that will already tell me how that everything is okay. Anyway, let's dive into the topic because it's quite a vast one. There's no fast answer, to this question. There is no scale 1 to 10 how hard is playing the harp. You could kind of compare it to other instruments, but the thing is, with playing any musical instrument and with any new skill, it always takes time to learn. With simpler skills, I don't know if it's like throwing the ball against the wall and catching it, you can do this relatively quickly, but with something quite complex as a musical instrument where you've got then different notes, different pitches, different rhythms, there might be different kinds of instruments and then different techniques of playing those instruments. There's no easy answer really, but I will try to do my best and tell you what I consider is possibly a challenge on the harp and how to overcome it, and also what things are easy and fun and worth doing it. And the harp is one of those instruments that has quite a few perks and fun things. So again, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. If I'm speaking too fast, please tell me. I think I've already started doing that just because I can see the pages and all the things that I would like to share with you. And finally, after the live, you will be able to download a PDF, which I prepared for you. I'll be using that to just make sure that I say everything that I want to say today. This will be available on my website. If you're watching from Instagram, you will need to go to my website and to resources. And then if you're watching from Facebook, that will be in the link that I'll add to the description of this live. And important information, if you are a subscriber of my newsletter, you don't need to sign up again. You have the link and the passwords and everything that you need in your newsletter. And if you have any problem with that, just let me know. So, how difficult it is to play the harp, really. And as I said, all instruments take some time to learn. All new skills take some time and take some commitment. It's not only about how many years you spend on that, but also how regularly you do this. And lots of beginners, especially those who haven't had any musical experience with other instruments, are wondering whether you need to have any special skills, whether they have the talent. Sometimes I'm asked that. Whether they have the gift for playing the harp or a musical instrument, or will it just be waste of time and money. So I think that there is no really such thing as talent, in the sense that you can't either have it or not. I think different people learn different things at a different pace. Even if you compare two harpists, two advanced harpists, one of them might be really good at sight reading, and the other one might take a bit more time. One of them is very quick at memorizing things, the other one may again need some more work with that. So different people learn different things differently. But I think the few skills that you need, I've listed them here on that list, are first and most important, I think, is to being able to make some kind of a plan and to stick to it. And it's really best to do this at the very beginning of your learning, when you still have lots of enthusiasm and when you are really keen to play the harp as often as possible. I think being in that state of mind of being really, really keen, it's really good to make sure that you find what times are best for playing, that you make a note of those times, and that you try to maybe stick to those times every day, because after a while, that may be again different for everyone, but after a week, two, or maybe when things become difficult, you may notice that that practice slips, that other things become more important to do in that free time that you previously had for the harp. So I think that ability to decide that I'm going to play the harp at this and that time, in the evening, in the morning, do 10 minutes, do 20 minutes, and then when the time is there, sitting down and starting to practice is really, really difficult, and not difficult, it's really essential, sorry, and that's what will help you keep going. Then the next thing would be the ability to focus, because I think you don't need to spend ages to start learning to play. At the later stage, when you learn to play more advanced pieces, where those pieces are just longer, maybe they have more than one page, you will need a bit more time. But at the beginning, if you only have 10 minutes, but do this every day, and you really focus for the duration of that 10 minutes, that's what will really make you progress. A good test for that is, can you put your phone, after the live, can you put your phone away for 10 minutes? Can you read a book for 10 minutes and not do something else in that time? It's a skill which I think is worth practicing, whether you play the harp or not, but which will become quite important when you have to focus on quite a few different things and avoid distractions. Then the next two skills on that list, these are the two last ones, are kind of intertwined. One of them is patience, and this is mostly patience towards yourself, to the fact that things take time, and sometimes you may feel that after the first day of learning you come back and you start again from the scratch, or it's even worse than it was before. So having this kind of understanding that this is a new skill, that this is quite a complex skill even at the beginning, and just be understanding with yourself. And then the last skill, I couldn't really find a good word, neither in English nor in Polish, so I put it down as being able to encourage yourself. I think this is a combination of some kind of kindness towards yourself, some kind of optimism, the faith that if you persist, then you will be able to learn the skills that you want to learn, because that skill will be what will allow you to come back to the harp, sit down and practice day by day, and finally get to your goals. So I think that's really important, somehow not thinking too negatively about yourself, not saying, oh, it sounds quite bad, I don't know if I will ever succeed. These kind of thoughts are really unhelpful and will not help you play the harp. Just clicking away for some notifications. So these were the skills. I think that list is very short, but if you have that, or if you think that you can somehow acquire those skills, practice them, you can practice them even away from the harp, then that's what will get you going. Then in terms of equipment, what do you need? Of course, you do need a harp. I will be talking a bit more about this later. One important thing for now is that you don't have to buy one. You can decide about purchase later. depending on the country where you live. In most countries nowadays, I would imagine that at least here in the UK, and I know that in Poland, in most continental Europe, there are rental schemes for the harp, and you are able to have an instrument of very good quality for rather low price, where you will be on which you will be able to learn. Then the next thing, and I will try to show this to you, is a music stand. If you are quite sure that you're going to learn to play with the music, and a music stand like this one, I can't show you all of it, but it's a foldable music stand. Instagram, can you see that? Foldable music stand, and that costs about £10, $10. You can buy one just not to incur too many costs for yourself, and then get something better in the future and have this one as a spare one. They are not very expensive. Then what will be quite useful, regardless of type of the harp that you play, will be a chromatic tuner, something like that, or an app on your phone. There are quite a few free apps which are good for tuning the harp, because that is something that you will need to do on your own by yourself. And then some space at your home where you can have safe place for your harp, so away from your radiators, not in the direct sunlight, somewhere preferably close to the wall, or maybe put a chair behind it so it doesn't accidentally get knocked over. So just that bare minimum, really. Anything else which doesn't fit into category of skills or of equipment, I put two things here. Time, that means time for lessons and practice. I think you need about 1 hour per week to allow for a lesson, or either with a teacher, or if you learn from videos or from some kind of an online program, then I think 1 hour is about the right time to familiarize yourself with that, or just go to the teacher's house or tune in into Skype and have a lesson. And then, as I said, starting from 10 minutes a day, it's a good practice portion for a beginner. As long as you do it every day, 10 minutes is a really good start. And then you will feel when you will need to increase that. But at the beginning, it's really about touching the harp every day, about making that your habit, that every day you sit down and you play a bit. Even tuning the harp is a good idea. If you haven't got time to play it, you just start tuning it, and usually you will get tempted to play even a tiny bit. The second thing from that different others category will be some kind of a budget. And here you would need to include renting a harp, harp lessons, that's a really important investment, possibly buying some music if your teacher thinks that some music books will be more appropriate for you than others, and then possibly spare strings. Most of the harps tend to break strings. Sometimes they break more often, less often. That depends on many different factors. They are not too expensive unless you play a big pedal harp and you get one of those really low strings breaking. But with most harps for the beginners, they are either nylon strung like this one, which are not as expensive as GAT, or they will. It won't be like tons of strings breaking straight away and replacing, but you just need to allow some position in your budget to pay for that. And about budgeting for harp and lessons. So, among others, the reason why I advocate for renting a harp is not only that you learn to play and then you choose your preferred instrument, knowing that you can try out different instruments, but I also think that instead of spending a big amount of money on buying harp straight away, it's a really much better idea to invest in the harp lessons. And that was actually my approach when I was a student. I don't know if many of you know that, but for many years I didn't have my own harp. I was either renting or practicing at college. Most of the time I was still renting a harp. But when I was 25, I was facing a quite difficult decision. I got a place to study for my master's degree at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London, which was a very big chance, great place to study. And I still didn't have my own harp, and I had some money put aside, which were supposed to be harp money. And now I had the question of whether to pay for my tuition fees or to buy that harp. And in the end, I decided to pay my tuition fees. And I thought that investing in myself, investing in my playing, will be something more important at this stage. Even though I was at that time, I played how many years? I have played the harp for 10 years at that stage. And I still decided that I can buy the harp at any time and I can find a place to rent it from, but it would be more important to invest in my skills. So that's another argument why I advise most of my students to start with renting the harp, because then you can book a term of lessons. I think even having 10 lessons as a beginner is really, really important, because then you learn good habits straight away. You don't have too many doubts. Why do I do this? Why do I do that? This person in that online video says that. This person in another tutorial says that. So I think that's a really good investment at the beginning, just to get yourself started, and then you might decide what you want to do later. Okay, and now moving on to another point, what is not necessary. So as I said before, you don't have to have any special gift or talent. There's no such thing as whether you qualify to play the harp or not. Then what is not necessary? Being of a certain age is not a requirement. There's no age limit. I personally, I don't ask my students how old are they, so I'm not very good at keeping track of how old was my oldest student. But I know of harp teachers who had students who were 80 and more. I don't want to throw the numbers around because I don't have very accurate data of these harp records, but there is no such thing as being too old to play the harp, and that shouldn't be a factor when you consider that. Then we said about musical talent. No previous musical experience is necessary. This may help. For example, if you played piano is quite closely related to the harp. And I guess before the era of the internet, if you didn't have a harp teacher nearby, that's what I would suggest you to do, to try to find a piano teacher instead and learn to play the piano, learn to read the music, and then try to find a harp teacher. But nowadays, with online lessons, with online courses, you can start with playing the harp straight away. Someone says hi. Thank you very much for letting me know that you can hear me. Oh, and I saw also some emojis on Instagram, so I'm glad everything is working. Let me know if I need to repeat anything, or if you have any questions, just put them in the comments. I'll be checking them every now and then. I think I said about everything that is not necessary, so now let's move on to what's easy and fun about playing the harp before we get to talking about challenges. So one really, really good thing about the harp is that you're getting a lovely sound right away. I will just adjust the levers to show you what I mean. You can do that even if you haven't played the harp before. With very little instruction, you just use your index finger to go up, thumb to go down, and as long as the harp is in tune, and mostly it should be, you will not need to do anything to get the nice sound. So it's quite a stark difference when you think about other instruments like any string instrument, violin, cello, or wood instruments, where I heard that to get any sound out from a flute, it takes about 2 weeks to learn to breathe into the flute first. So this is very nice about the harp, that first learning curve is already a very satisfying one, because as soon as you pluck some notes, you will get a really lovely sound. Then, second really good thing about the harp is that there is no need to adjust the intonation while you play. So when you look at a violin, or again about any string instruments, to some extent also wood instruments, you need to constantly listen out whether the sound that you produce is in tune, whether the pitch is correct, and you need to constantly be able to adjust the position of your hands or of your mouth. On the harp, we tune the harp before we start playing. We will talk a bit more about the tuning later. But then you just plug the string and you don't have to worry about adjusting anything to make sure that pitch is accurate. So that's quite easy when it comes to playing. Then about reading the music on the harp, I spoke recently to a flute teacher who also learns to play the harp, and she said that actually reading the music on the harp may be a tiny bit more straightforward, because when you look at the strings, you will see that each string being a step away from another means also being very close on the paper, which in case of wood instruments, brass instruments as well, they have different how do you say that word in English? There are different patterns of how you put your fingers on the instruments, opening and closing your fingers, and each is different for a different note, and those patterns are sometimes not really related, so that makes it a bit hard to learn them in the first place. While on the harp, what you see looking at the harp from this side and what you see on the paper has quite a close relation in terms of patterns. So I think that's quite easy when you learn to play the harp with the music. What's easy on the harp? I played that already before, but glissandi is the formal name for this kind of sound that you're making. And as I said, you can make them straight away, and they are really lovely, and you can just play them anytime. That's really easy and fun to play on the harp, and I don't think there are many other instruments which can do it, make it that lovely so easily. And one last thing, and it's kind of a secret, so don't tell it to any other instrumentalist, that scales and arpeggios on the harp are actually quite easy once you know the technique, because let me set up the levers one more time. There's a basic scale pattern on the harp, and you can find my live on scales from some time ago. Basically, we put four fingers on the strings, and then we just come over with the thumb. And then, if you want to play another scale, you just adjust your levers or adjust your pedals, and you play that scale in another key, but this is still exactly the same pattern. So, when you think about pianist or violinist or cellist practicing different scales and having at least 12 different scales with lots of variations to practice, and they are all different fingerings, different patterns, and you have to learn all that, you can be quite happy about how easy it is to play the harp. The same goes for arpeggios. Once you learn one pattern, no levers there. Once you learn the pattern and you just adjust the levers, you need to remember to do this before you play, you can very easily move between the scales, so just don't tell anyone, please. How are we doing with time, and how are we doing with questions? Hello to everyone who joined. Hello to everyone who waved at me. I can't quite see the time. Oh, but we're doing quite well. It's not too bad. We're kind of halfway through, I hope. So now moving to challenges on the harp and how to overcome them. So one challenge which happens on the harp and doesn't happen that much on other instruments is the fact that we need to look at the music. I'll put my music stand here for a second. No, you can't really see me. But if I have my music stand here in front of me and then I have the harp here, I need to alternate between looking at the music stand and at the strings of the harp, which can be a bit tricky at the beginning. Most other instruments you don't really have to look at the strings, you don't really have to look at your hands when you're playing. With the harp, unfortunately, you kind of do. And I know that there are some people who are blind, and historically there have been many blind harpists. I haven't got experience teaching blind people, and I cannot say much about that for that reason. But for all my other students who are coming for the lessons, I know that we spend some time at the beginning making sure that they are fine looking in both those places. So what you can do to overcome that challenge? Get a music stand, because playing from a chair or from the floor is not really good for your eyes, not really good for your back. So get a music stand and put it as high as you need to comfortably look at it when you're sitting upright by the harp. So usually in the line of your vision. Then move your music stand possibly as close to the harp without touching the harp or without knocking it over, so that distance is smallest possible. And then when I start with teaching new students, I ask them to play with one finger at a time, and looking to the music and checking which place are they in the music, just to get into that habit of being able to follow what's happening on the page, how the notes are moving, and looking where it is on the harp. Then the next challenge, and I recently actually saw a post on Facebook, someone asking about that, coordinating both hands doing different things, because very often one hand will be, for example, playing a melody, and the other hand will be doing something completely different, like playing chords. Something like that, for example. And one person was asking, how can I stop my hands from trying to do the same thing? When I'm doing one thing, the other hand tries to mirror that. So I would say the best thing to manage coordinating both hands is learning through well-structured lessons, either with a teacher or through a well-structured online course, where you will start from learning pieces which are quite easy, where the hands are either doing the same thing to start with, for example that, or where someone really carefully thought about what one hand should be doing and what the other should be doing. Starting from the basics, I think starting with playing one finger at a time is a really good method, because then you can do that thing with one hand, the other thing with the other, and gradually get used to them doing different things. It may be a bit easier if you're self-taught to start by picking pieces where hands don't really play at the same time, in the sense that one hand is playing, then the other is playing. I'll try to show you an example of such piece. It's called Azaleas in Houston, and it's from grade 1 exam, and in that piece you have left hand playing, right hand playing, left hand, right hand. So there is no danger that your hands will start doing other things than they should, but when you're working on that early stage, try to make sure that you're focusing on placing the hands. So before the other hand starts playing, you know where the other one is going, so you don't have a situation where you end up with both fingers of the strings and then you don't know where they are going. You have to be quite strategic even when learning simpler pieces, and being very strategic in your practice when you have a situation where two hands are playing at the same time and they are supposed to be doing different things. Try to ease the load a bit on one hand, and first make sure that they both know what they are doing on their own, so make sure right hand knows what it's doing, left hand knows what it's doing. But then when you try putting them together, maybe start with right hand doing exactly what it should be doing, but then adding just some elements of the left hand. So for example, if left hand would be playing chords and those chords would be changing, what I would do is try playing right hand as it is. For example, the melody would go, and then just have one set of chords of the left hand. I was talking a bit more about this in the last live before the break, where we were working on Siogan, and I was showing you how I draw circles in the music, choosing which beats the right hand is supposed to play, which beats left hand is supposed to play. So there are some of those quite cool tricks that you can use to make sure that you're always managing to put hands together. Next tricky thing might be understanding the way levers or pedals, in case of pedal harp, work on the harp. And my advice here would be start from pieces without lever changes or pedal changes. And at the beginning I would try to maybe stick to pieces in one key. C major is usually the key where most of the beginner pieces are written in. And then as you're learning your basic technique, you could also learn more about music theory on the side. And I've got that one book that I usually recommend to my students. It's a book for young musicians, but it's really good. It's called Music Theory for Young Musicians, and there are lots of books. You don't have to get exactly this one, but those books, especially the ones for children, are usually very well explaining everything that you need to know. And there are sections, the sections which would interest you would be accidentals and semitones and tones, and it would be really good if the book has, most of the books have explanation shown on the keyboard, on the piano keys, because it's a bit hard to understand that on the harp. The notes on the harp that we have are kind of hidden here in the levers, so even though, for example, between red and red string you've got 8 strings, you can actually get many more notes by adjusting the levers, and that might be a bit hard to understand when you just see the harp. So getting one of those books where it's shown where all those notes are hidden on the piano keyboard is really helpful. And then your teacher will also be able to tell you different tricks on how to manage that, because there's quite a lot that goes into there in terms of music theory. Then technique, hand position and placing. So that can be very different depending on the kind of the harp that you play. Most aspects are quite similar. You need to sit straight, make sure that you're sitting well. You need to have your body quite relaxed, no unnecessary tension, but some aspects might be different. So if you study with a teacher, they will be able to guide you through the technique that you want to play. So for example, if you know that you want to play a certain type of a harp, it would be good that you find a teacher which plays that technique. And the technique, I think, is one challenge that makes it really, really worth having those first lessons with a teacher, investing in those first lessons, because they will be able to give you an instant feedback on what you're doing. Sometimes with videos and online tutorials, you can't really tell whether what you're doing is what is the same that the person in the video is doing. Plus, everyone has different hands, different proportions of the hands. For example, I once had a student who had rather short thumbs, shorter than most people, not something that you would notice straight away, but something that you would notice once you put your hand on the harp. And because of that, obviously, she wasn't able to put her fingers as high as you would see in most other harpists, or at least most harpists that you see on YouTube. And a teacher that sees you can pick up on these kind of things and tell you useful feedback. For example, no, it's not about making your thumb go to this point on the string, it's about making sure that there is enough space for the thumb to make that movement, and they will be able to explain that to you depending on your body shape. And then some other tips about technique that I put in here. Practicing every day is always helpful. I could put it under all of these challenges, and being really patient, because it's a lot of things. It's not necessarily the position our body will want to assume naturally. We don't really do many things like that apart from texting maybe. So it is a bit challenging, but it can be overcome with the right approach, with patient and understanding and kind of optimistic approach. Now the next two things, tuning and replacing strings. This is something that you will need to do by yourself on your own harp. And this is also a matter of practice, and getting a chromatic tuner for tuning the harp will help. Doing that a few times with the guidance of your teacher, either replacing strings or tuning. One thing about tuning that many people don't realize is how small the movements are. So if you find tuning challenging, just try to make the movements very, very small initially, and observe how it changes gradually. You might want to have notes on hand about tuning, about replacing strings, just so you don't have to panic when suddenly something goes wrong and you don't know where to find the answers to your questions, googling things frantically. So just make sure that the sources that you have at hand are something you trust and you want to follow. One note about replacing strings. You may want to consider different kinds of harps with different kinds of strings, which is another reason to rent before you buy a harp, because then you can, for example, rent a harp with nylon strings and see how it works for you, see how often they are breaking, how hard it is to replace strings like that, and then maybe you want to try other harps. It's all things to consider before you make a big decision of buying a harp, but when replacing strings, there are quite a few factors. What strings are made of and how to replace them will also depend on that. Now the last challenge maybe, which can be challenging, can be tricky, but doesn't have to be, is transporting the harp. Lots of people before they start playing the harp, they think about this big harp which is behind me. I don't want to upset too much my setup here, but basically many people think that you have to get that when you play the harp. And let me now show that to Facebook if I can. That big harp. Lots of people think that this is what you need to get. Sorry Instagram for putting you out of place. So no, you can get a smaller harp which is usually able to fit at the back of any car that you're driving, even a car which is not a van. You can, before buying a harp, attend harp festivals and see different models of harps, because there are all sorts of different sizes. Nowadays there are also harps which are made of carbon fiber, which are super light and which are really easy to transport, and they don't get knocked about as easily as wood, don't get damaged as easily. So you might want to just look at all those things before you buy. If you're quite worried, you may also consider buying a harp trolley, even for the small lever harp. For a big one like that, you will need a trolley, I'm pretty sure. But you can also get a trolley for a small harp. Might be best to try that trolley with a harp, because most of the trolleys are made for bigger ones. So not all of them might fit a small harp, but there are always ways around that, and it's all possible to manage. So that's how we got to the end of the PDF. I didn't see any questions, but if you have them, you can just send them to me now, so I can update the PDF, and I'll be also answering the questions under this live on Facebook and through the Instagram stories on Instagram. One final thing that I wanted to say, again, that was inspired by a post I saw on Facebook earlier today. Someone gave an opinion saying that playing harp well is very hard, and that playing harp terribly is very easy. To which someone replied saying, that makes me very sad, because am I a hopeless case in this situation if I practice and this still sounds horrible? So I felt very sorry for that person, and I just wanted to say that what I said at the beginning, that with every new skill and every new technique that you're learning, there is a period of time where it may just not look great or sound great, or whatever factor you're looking at, and this just all takes time. And playing a harp is quite a complex skill, even with simple pieces, so you need to teach your hands, your mind, to slowly coordinate all the things that you need to think about. But then when you learn then when you progress through that, you might think that you're still struggling, but in fact you're playing more difficult pieces, you're learning new skills, and it might still sound not so great at the beginning when you're learning, but unless you just want to learn 3 pieces and play them all the time the same, you will always have a period of time where you will be learning to do something, and it may not sound as great as you would wish it to sound. And I'm sure I said that before, but I remember when I was recording something, a sound engineer who was working at a music college at the same time told me that people who sound, how did it go? That people who sound great in the studio once they start recording something are usually the ones who sound really badly in the practice rooms, because they practice in small bits, they stop very often, they repeat sections all the time, they make those sections harder, they try different rhythms, for example, which change the shape of the piece. And he said that those people are the ones who are successful when it comes to playing through a piece. And he said that those who sound amazing through the closed doors, who are playing large sections of pieces or playing lots of pieces through, are usually the ones who come to the to the recording studio and just can't get through it because of all the extra stress and stuff. So I wouldn't worry too much if your practice, if you think that your practice doesn't sound good. I think from anyone listening from the outside, that property of the harp, that you make a great sound straight away, will never make anyone think that it sounds bad, because just of the nature of the instrument, whatever you play, unless it's terribly out of tune, but really, really terribly out of tune, if that's not the case, everything will really sound pleasant to everyone else's ears. So keep that in mind when thinking of your neighbors when you start learning to play the harp. And just to finish, saying a few words about my harp course. If you would like to study with a teacher, I'm now offering a package of 10 lessons taken weekly over the course of 3 months, and autumn term of harp lessons. They are available from my website, and you can read more information about that on my website. It's a course which was created especially with beginners in mind, to make sure that they have a lesson every week, and that they have a practice plan every week, and that there is this constant dose of motivation and help and guidance. So if you're thinking about starting to learn to play the harp, I think that's a great format to start, making sure that you've got very regular lessons, and that's a complete set of skills that you will learn after those 10 lessons, but at your own pace, making sure that you will learn pieces that you enjoy, that everything that is not working so well, we go over that again. And that course is open until tonight, until 10 p.m. I've got a few spots left, and I will be only taking new students onto that course in January. So if you would like to learn to play the harp in 2019, that's your chance. If you would like to learn to play with me, it's not an online course. Just to explain, it's not in a format where you watch videos and then you try to play something at home. It will be lessons with me, either in person if you live in Scotland or around here. We can have lessons over Skype, but this will be always me that you see, and real teacher and lessons one-to-one, as you would I think, which makes the best progress. And I think if I were to learn a new skill, I would go for that format first, just to start with. So if you have any questions, let me know again, and see you next week. The live will be on at 11 a.m. next week, just as today, on Instagram and on Facebook. All materials are on my website, to which I will send the link now. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Take care, and see you